Hey there. Tonight we begin with a journey into the tantalising possibility that enormous wealth still lies hidden within European castle walls, beneath their floors, and in their forgotten chambers, where centuries of warfare, political upheaval, and family decline left treasure hoards concealed and lost to history. Where the romantic dream of discovering gold, jewels, and priceless artefacts buried by desperate nobles meets the archaeological reality of what actually gets found when modern investigators search medieval fortifications, where ground-penetrating radar reveals anomalies suggesting hidden chambers, while metal detectors occasionally strike genuine finds that confirm the treasure hunter's eternal hope that one more dig might reveal life-changing wealth. From the documented hoards that prove treasure does exist to the legendary lost fortunes that probably never did, from the technological methods that modern searchers employ to the legal tangles that determine who owns what might be found, from the castles where serious treasure hunters focus their attention to the harsh reality that most searching produces nothing but disappointment and expense, from the genuine archaeological discoveries that weren't treasure in the romantic sense, but that revealed priceless historical information, to the ongoing tension between professional archaeology and amateur treasure hunting. The story of castle treasures reveals the complicated intersection of historical fact, romantic fantasy, legitimate archaeology, and the eternal human hope that fortune might literally be buried beneath our feet, waiting to be discovered by someone with the right combination of knowledge, technology, persistence, and luck. So before settling in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if genuinely enjoying what's shared here. And let those comments know where the listening is happening from and what time it is there. It's always wonderful to see who's joining from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. When thinking about castle treasures, imagination immediately conjures images shaped by adventure fiction. Ancient chests overflowing with gold coins, jewel-encrusted crowns hidden in secret chambers, maps marking locations of buried fortunes, the romance of discovery transforming ordinary lives into wealthy retirement. These images draw from a genuine tradition of hidden wealth, yet they exist in tension with the more prosaic reality that while treasures do occasionally emerge from castle contexts, the vast majority of searching produces nothing, and the genuinely valuable finds are usually made by professional archaeologists rather than romantic treasure hunters. The reality exists somewhere between complete skepticism and uncritical belief in treasure legends. Documented cases prove that substantial wealth was indeed hidden in castle contexts, and sometimes remained undiscovered for centuries. The motivations for concealment were genuine. Warfare, political instability, and sudden death all created situations where nobles hid valuables that were never recovered. Yet the same historical circumstances that led to concealment also led to most hidden wealth being eventually found, spent, or lost to circumstances that make recovery impossible. The challenge is distinguishing the small percentage of treasure that genuinely remains undiscovered from the vast majority of legends that are either complete fiction or that describe treasure that was recovered long ago. Picture this: a castle in Germany, perhaps around 1650 during the catastrophic 30 Years' War. The castle lord learns that enemy forces are approaching and will likely sack his castle. He takes his most valuable portable wealth, gold coins, jewellery, important documents, and hides them in a concealed chamber within the castle walls that only he and perhaps one trusted servant know about. The castle is indeed captured, the lord is killed in the fighting, and the servant who knew about the hiding place either dies or flees, and is never able to return. The treasure remains where it was hidden, unknown even to the lord's heirs who eventually reclaim the damaged castle. Centuries pass, the castle changes hands multiple times, and the knowledge of the hidden chamber is completely lost. The treasure remains, waiting for someone to rediscover it through renovation work, through archaeological investigation, or through pure chance. This scenario is not fantasy. It has happened numerous times throughout European history. Yet it's also relatively rare, with the vast majority of hidden wealth being recovered by contemporaries, or being lost to circumstances that make subsequent recovery impossible. Tonight's journey explores the complex reality of castle treasures, the documented finds that prove treasures exist, the famous legends that continue attracting searchers, the methods used to search for hidden wealth, the legal and ethical issues surrounding treasure hunting, the specific castles that serious searchers focus on, the technological tools that modern investigation employs, and the harsh economic reality that treasure hunting is usually an expensive hobby rather than a path to wealth. From the genuine discoveries to the persistent myths, the story reveals both why the treasure hunting dream persists and why most who pursue it are disappointed. The genuine treasure discoveries that have emerged from European castles and their environs provide the factual foundation that keeps treasure hunting dreams alive, demonstrating that substantial wealth was indeed hidden and forgotten, remaining concealed for decades or centuries before being accidentally or deliberately discovered. Understanding these documented finds reveals both the reality of hidden wealth and the circumstances that lead to successful discovery. The Hoxton hoard discovered in Suffolk, England in 1992, represents one of the largest and most spectacular treasure finds from Roman Britain, though not specifically from a castle context. A farmer searching for a lost hammer with a metal detector instead found over 15,000 Roman coins, along with jewellery and silver objects weighing about 7.7 pounds of gold and 52 pounds of silver. While this find predates castle construction, it demonstrates that substantial wealth was indeed buried, and that metal detectors in the hands of amateurs can make genuine discoveries. The hoard was properly reported and is now displayed in the British Museum, with the finder receiving substantial financial reward under British treasure laws. The Staffordshire hoard found in 2009 in England contained over 3,500 items of Anglo-Saxon gold and silver metalwork, the largest hoard of Anglo-Saxon gold ever found, again, not a castle context specifically, but the find demonstrates that enormous wealth could be buried and forgotten. The discovery was made by an amateur metal detectorist searching farmland, proving that spectacular finds can occur outside formal archaeological excavations. The finder and landowner received £3.285 million to split, demonstrating that even when treasure must be shared and reported to authorities, substantial rewards can result. The Schroeder treasure found during demolition work in Schroeder-Śląska, Poland in the 1980s and 1990s, provides castle-adjacent context. The hoard included gold coins, jewellery and ornate items that had been hidden during 14th century conflicts. The discovery occurred during construction work rather than through deliberate treasure hunting, illustrating how accidental discoveries remain the most common way that hidden wealth emerges. The treasure's value was estimated at substantial figures, though exact amounts are difficult to verify, and the treasure's disposition involved considerable controversy. The Beeston Castle treasure found in Cheshire, England in 1842 involved Roman coins discovered within the castle grounds. Workers quarrying stone found a large pot containing approximately 3,000 Roman coins. While the specifics are less documented than modern finds, the discovery at an actual castle site demonstrates that valuable hoards can remain within castle contexts for over a millennium before discovery. The find supports the logical conclusion that if Roman-era wealth survived undiscovered until the 19th century, then medieval-era hoards might similarly remain concealed. The various coin hoards found during castle renovations and archaeological excavations across Europe number in the hundreds, though most individual finds are modest rather than spectacular. The pattern reveals that hiding coins, particularly during warfare or instability, was common practice, and that enough hidden caches remained undiscovered by contemporaries to create steady stream of discoveries when later inhabitants disturbed castle structures. The cumulative pattern of finds validates the basic premise that wealth was hidden in castle contexts, and that at least some remained undiscovered until modern times. The Scottish castle treasures, including various finds of hidden valuables during restoration work, demonstrate that British castles specifically have yielded genuine discoveries. The finding of gold coins hidden in wall cavities, the discovery of jewellery concealed in chimneys or beneath floors, and the emergence of plate and other valuables from forgotten chambers all confirm that Scottish nobles hid wealth within their castles, and that modern renovation work occasionally reveals these caches. The specific details of many discoveries aren't well publicised, often because finders prefer privacy, but the pattern is well established. The European castle renovation discoveries that emerge occasionally in news reports show that finds continue in present day. The gold coins found during restoration of a French chateau, the medieval jewellery discovered when updating plumbing in a German castle, the documents and coins found in Italian fortifications during earthquake repairs, All these demonstrate that castle restoration work regularly produces discoveries, though usually modest ones that don't make international headlines. The pattern suggests that substantial undiscovered material likely remains, particularly in castles that haven't undergone thorough modern investigation. The archaeological excavations at castle sites produce regular finds of valuable objects, though archaeologists typically consider context and information more valuable than the object's market worth. The excavation of castle treasuries reveals what was kept in known strong rooms, while the discovery of concealed spaces occasionally produces unexpected hoards. The professional excavations provide controlled discovery that maximizes historical information while ensuring finds are properly documented and preserved. The archaeological discoveries complement treasure hunting finds by demonstrating how much valuable material exists in castle contexts, even when not deliberately concealed. The documentation challenges surrounding many treasure finds create uncertainty about exactly what has been discovered. Many finds aren't publicly reported, either because finders legally kept them private because they were discovered before modern treasure laws, or because disclosure would invite theft or unwanted attention. The incomplete record means that the known documented finds represent only a fraction of what has actually been discovered, suggesting that the true rate of treasure discovery is higher than public records indicate. The patterns that documented finds reveal include several consistent features. Most discoveries occur accidentally during renovation, construction, or agricultural work rather than through deliberate treasure hunting. The finds are typically coins rather than other valuables, because coins were the most common form of portable wealth, and because their compact size made them easiest to conceal. The locations within castles where finds occur, hidden in walls, beneath floors, in chimneys and concealed chambers, reflect the obvious hiding places that offer some concealment while being accessible to the hider. The ages of found treasures span from ancient Roman through medieval to early modern periods, showing that hiding wealth was constant practice across centuries. The value of discovered treasures varies enormously from modest coin collections worth hundreds of pounds to spectacular hoards valued in millions. The spectacular finds receive disproportionate attention, creating false impression that treasure hunting regularly produces enormous wealth. The reality is that most finds are modest, with their greatest value being historical rather than monetary. Yet the occasional spectacular discovery keeps the dream alive and motivates continued searching despite low odds of success. The reporting requirements under modern treasure laws in various European countries means that significant fines must be reported to authorities, with valuation and disposition following legal procedures. The British Treasure Act provides rewards to finders, while ensuring important discoveries are preserved for public benefit. Similar laws in other European countries balance finders' interests against public interest in preserving archaeological and historical materials. The legal frameworks mean that even when treasure is found, the finder doesn't simply keep everything, but the frameworks also provide legitimate rewards that make proper reporting attractive compared to illegal concealment. Understanding documented discoveries reveals that castle treasures are real, that substantial wealth was hidden, and that at least some remained undiscovered until modern times, when accidental discovery or deliberate searching brought it to light. The pattern validates the basic premise that motivates treasure hunters, while also revealing the rarity of significant finds and the dominance of accidental discovery over deliberate searching and producing actual results. The documented finds provide proof of concept, while the statistics remind us that treasure hunting is fundamentally a low-probability pursuit, where success depends heavily on luck, alongside knowledge and persistence. The legendary treasures that capture imagination and that motivate searching often exist in murky territory between documented history and pure fiction, where genuine historical events become embellished over time, where wishful thinking transforms ordinary losses into spectacular hidden fortunes, and where the absence of definitive proof either way keeps legends alive. Understanding these famous treasure stories requires distinguishing what can be historically verified from what is speculation, legend, or outright invention. The Knights Templar treasure represents perhaps the most famous and most elaborated treasure legend in European history. The story holds that when the Templars were suppressed in 1307, their enormous accumulated wealth, gold, silver, holy relics, perhaps the Holy Grail itself, was hidden and never recovered. Various locations, from Scottish castles to French fortifications to hidden vaults, beneath Templar churches have been proposed as hiding places. The legend has spawned countless books, films, and treasure hunting expeditions. The reality is more prosaic. The Templars were certainly wealthy, owning extensive properties and operating sophisticated financial networks. Yet when Philip IV of France moved against them, he seized most of their liquid assets and properties. The contemporary accounts mention treasure being transported away, but these likely represented modest portable wealth rather than the legendary hoards that later stories describe. The probability that enormous Templar wealth remains hidden in specific locations is low, yet the legend persists because definitive proof of negative is impossible, and because the romantic appeal is irresistible. The Nazi gold legend involves various stories about German forces hiding looted wealth in castles and other locations across Europe as World War II ended. The most famous version involves the Amber Room, an ornate chamber decorated with amber panels taken from a Russian palace, supposedly hidden in a German castle or in underground bunkers. Other stories describe gold and art treasures hidden in Austrian castle tunnels, in subterranean vaults beneath Czech fortifications, or in various other locations. Some Nazi hidden wealth was indeed discovered. The discovery of gold and art in Austrian salt mines and various other locations proves that Germans did hide valuable materials as the war ended. Yet most hidden Nazi wealth was probably recovered either by advancing Allied forces, by Germans who hid materials and later retrieved them, or was lost to circumstances that make recovery impossible, such as being in areas that are now thoroughly developed or that were deliberately destroyed. The Amber Room has never been found and was likely destroyed during the war, yet the legend persists, generating ongoing searches and occasional claims of discovery that never pan out. The treasure of Montségur Castle in France involves legends about Cathar wealth hidden during the siege of 1244. The story holds that before the castle fell, 4 Cathar parfaits, religious leaders, escaped with treasure including gold and possibly the Holy Grail. Various caves and locations around Montségur have been searched, with some finds of artefacts but nothing matching the legendary treasure. The historical reality is that the Cathars were religious dissenters, who probably possessed more in terms of religious texts and community resources than vast hoards of gold. Yet the romantic narrative of religious martyrs protecting sacred treasures keeps the legend alive. The heirloom of the House of Habsburg legend describes various treasures supposedly hidden in Austrian castles during World War I or during the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The stories describe crown jewels, religious relics, gold reserves, and priceless art hidden in secret chambers or buried in castle grounds, while some Habsburg treasures were indeed secured and later recovered, and while the Habsburg collections contain spectacular items now in museums, the specific legendary hidden hoards are almost certainly fictional, or represent materials that were recovered by authorities during the post-war period. The John of Austria treasure legend claims that the illegitimate son of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V hid enormous wealth in a castle in Spain or in the Netherlands. The story holds that his sudden death prevented him from revealing the treasure's location. The historical John of Austria was a military commander rather than an accumulator of vast wealth, and contemporary accounts don't support the existence of any hidden fortune. Yet the legend attracts treasure hunters to locations associated with him, demonstrating how famous historical figures attract treasure legends, whether or not any basis exists. The various lost royal treasury legends attached to different European monarchies share common features. A king or duke facing defeat hides the national treasury or crown jewels, dies before revealing the location, and the treasure remains hidden for centuries. Most such stories are either complete fiction or describe wealth that was recovered by contemporaries. The few cases where royal wealth actually was lost typically involved being thrown into rivers or lakes during retreats, making recovery difficult or impossible, even if the approximate location is known. The alchemist's gold legends describe wealthy alchemists who successfully created gold, hid their fortunes in castle laboratories, and died before revealing the locations. The stories conflate genuine historical alchemists who lived in various castles with fictional successful transmutations. Since no alchemist actually succeeded in creating gold from base metals, any hidden wealth would represent conventional riches rather than alchemical products. Yet the legends persist, often attached to castles where historical alchemists worked, creating treasure-hunting interest in locations where the actual probability of finds is minimal. The evaluation criteria for treasure legends should include several considerations. Does contemporary historical documentation support the existence of the wealth described? Were the individuals or institutions alleged to possess the treasure actually wealthy? What circumstances supposedly led to the treasure being hidden? Are the alleged hiding locations specific enough to be searched, or are they vague enough to be unsearchable? Have serious searches been conducted, and what were the results? How much time has elapsed since the alleged hiding, and what happened to the locations in the interim? The application of these criteria to most famous treasure legends reveals significant problems. Most lack contemporary documentation supporting the existence of the alleged wealth. Many involve individuals or institutions that weren't actually as wealthy as legends claim. The circumstances allegedly leading to hiding are often historically implausible or contradicted by evidence. The locations are typically either too vague to search effectively or have been thoroughly searched without results. Long elapsed time usually means that even if treasure existed, subsequent events likely led to its recovery or loss. The persistence of treasure legends, despite historical implausibility, reflects several psychological and social factors. The romantic appeal of hidden wealth is powerful, offering hope that fortune might be discovered through knowledge and effort, rather than requiring years of conventional work. The impossibility of proving negatives means that legends can never be definitively disproven. The treasure might exist somewhere, even if not in locations already searched. The occasional genuine discovery keeps hope alive that the next search might succeed. The commercial interests of those promoting treasure books, tours, or equipment create incentives to maintain legends regardless of evidence. The harm that treasure legends cause includes wasting resources on pointless searches, damaging archaeological sites through amateur digging, creating false hope that distracts from realistic financial planning, and occasionally leading to fraud when unscrupulous promoters sell bogus treasure maps or search equipment. The benefits include preserving public interest in history, motivating serious historical research into legends' origins, occasionally leading to genuine discoveries when systematic searching occurs in historically plausible locations, and providing harmless recreation for those who enjoy treasure hunting, as hobby without unrealistic expectations of success. Understanding famous treasure legends requires balance between romantic skepticism and recognition that occasional genuine treasures do exist. Most legendary hoards are either fiction or describe wealth that was recovered long ago. Yet the documented pattern of genuine discoveries proves that hidden wealth does occasionally survive to be found by later generations. The challenge is evaluating specific legends critically, distinguishing historically plausible scenarios from obvious fiction, and accepting that even when treasure might exist, the probability of any individual searcher finding it is vanishingly small, regardless of dedication or expenditure of resources. The technological tools available to contemporary treasure hunters have transformed searching from purely speculative digging to more systematic investigation, using instruments that can detect hidden objects, map underground structures, and identify anomalies suggesting concealed chambers or buried materials. Understanding these technologies reveals both new capabilities and continuing limitations in detecting castle treasures. The metal detectors that revolutionized treasure hunting from the 1960s onward use electromagnetic induction to identify buried metallic objects. The device generates electromagnetic field that induces electrical currents in metal objects, which in turn creates secondary electromagnetic fields that the detector senses. The modern metal detectors offer sophisticated discrimination that can distinguish ferrous from non-ferrous metals, can filter out trash items while alerting to potentially valuable objects, and can provide depth indication for detected targets. The serious detectors cost thousands of dollars and require skill and experience to operate effectively. The applications of metal detectors to castle treasure hunting are substantial but limited. The devices can locate coins, jewellery, and other metal objects buried in castle grounds, or concealed within walls if the searcher has legal access to search. The successful finds made by metal detectorists demonstrate the technology's genuine utility. The Hoxton hoard and Staffordshire hoard, mentioned earlier, were both found with detectors, yet the limitations are significant. The devices typically detect objects only within 2 feet of the surface, limiting their utility for deeply buried hoards. The thick stone walls of castles prevent detection of objects concealed within wall cavities unless searches occur from inside. The large amounts of metal in castle structures create interference that produces false signals and that masks actual valuable targets. The ground-penetrating radar, GPR, provides ability to image subsurface structures without excavation, using radar pulses that reflect differently from various underground materials. The GPR can identify buried walls, chambers, tunnels and voids that might represent concealed spaces containing treasure. The technology creates visual representations of underground structures that archaeologists and treasure hunters can interpret to identify promising investigation locations. The serious GPR systems cost tens of thousands of dollars and require expertise to operate and to interpret results, but they provide information that no other technology can match. The castle applications of GPR are promising but challenging. The technology can map unknown castle foundations, can identify filled-in chambers or blocked passages, and can detect anomalies suggesting concealed spaces. The successful use of GPR by archaeologists investigating castle sites has revealed numerous previously unknown structures. Yet the interpretation requires expertise. What looks like a hidden chamber might be ordinary construction features, collapsed spaces, or natural geological formations. The dense, irregular construction of medieval castles creates complex radar returns that are difficult to interpret. The cost of equipment and expertise means that GPR surveys require serious investment that amateur treasure hunters usually cannot afford. The magnetometers that measure variations in Earth's magnetic field caused by buried ferrous materials provide another remote sensing option. The devices can detect iron objects and can identify large-scale features like buried walls or foundations that affect magnetic fields. The magnetometers are particularly useful for preliminary surveys, identifying areas worth more detailed investigation. Yet the castle environment creates challenges. The large amounts of iron in castle structures create magnetic fields that can mask targets, while modern ferrous debris from later periods creates noise that complicates interpretation. The electrical resistivity surveying that measures ground resistance to electrical current can identify underground structures by detecting resistance variations between different materials. The technique can map buried foundations, can identify filled chambers that have different resistivity than surrounding ground, and can detect tunnels or voids. The method requires systematic survey patterns, covering areas of interest and sophisticated interpretation of resulting data. The castle applications are similar to GPR. The technology can reveal unknown structures, but requires professional expertise and significant investment. The LiDAR technology, light detection and ranging, that uses laser pulses to create precise three-dimensional maps, has revolutionized landscape archaeology and has applications to castle investigation. The aerial LiDAR can reveal subtle surface features indicating buried structures, can map castle defensive earthworks invisible at ground level, and can identify long-forgotten paths or buildings surrounding castles. The ground-based LiDAR can create precise architectural models of existing castle structures, potentially revealing anomalies suggesting concealed chambers. Yet LiDAR detects surface features rather than buried objects, limiting its utility for finding deeply hidden treasures unless surface clues exist indicating their locations. The infrared thermography that detects temperature differences can identify concealed chambers or passages by detecting different thermal properties compared to solid walls. The technology has successfully revealed hidden doors, blocked passages, and concealed spaces in various historical buildings. The castle applications involve systematic infrared scanning of walls and floors to identify anomalies worth physical investigation. Yet the effectiveness depends on temperature differentials existing, which requires specific conditions that might not be present. The thick stone walls of castles make detection challenging, and the technology cannot distinguish treasure from empty concealed spaces. The acoustic surveying methods that analyze how sound waves propagate through structures can identify voids or chambers by detecting different acoustic properties. The techniques range from simple sounding, literally tapping walls and listening for hollow sounds, to sophisticated acoustic tomography, creating three-dimensional models based on sound wave propagation. The applications to castle investigation include identifying hidden chambers, locating sealed passages, and mapping wall construction. Yet interpretation requires expertise, and the complex construction of medieval castles makes acoustic analysis challenging. The integration of multiple technologies provides more reliable results than single methods alone. The typical professional investigation combines GPR, magnetometry, and electrical resistivity to create comprehensive subsurface maps. The correlation of results from multiple methods helps distinguish genuine anomalies worth investigating from artifacts of individual techniques. The archaeologists investigating castle sites routinely use multiple remote sensing technologies before committing to excavation, demonstrating the value of comprehensive technological surveys. The limitations that technology cannot overcome remain significant. No existing technology can definitively identify specific objects as treasure versus other buried materials without actual exposure and examination. The technologies detect anomalies and structures, but cannot determine contents of concealed spaces without physical investigation. The legal restrictions on actually digging to investigate promising anomalies mean that even when technology suggests something interesting, permission to excavate might be impossible to obtain. The costs of professional survey using sophisticated equipment are substantial, typically requiring institutional or commercial backing rather than being affordable to amateur treasure hunters. The DIY and amateur approaches to technological treasure hunting involve using consumer-grade metal detectors, using smartphone apps, claiming various detection capabilities, and sometimes using improvised or pseudo-scientific devices. The consumer metal detectors can make genuine finds as documented discoveries demonstrate. Yet the smartphone apps are generally useless. No phone sensors can detect buried treasure despite claims. The various dowsing rods, molecular frequency discriminators, and other pseudo-scientific devices promoted for treasure hunting range from useless to fraudulent, exploiting believers' hopes while providing no actual detection capability. Understanding modern technology reveals that legitimate tools exist that can detect buried objects, and that can identify concealed structures worth investigating. The serious remote sensing technologies used by professional archaeologists regularly reveal unknown castle features and occasionally identify promising locations for finding hidden wealth. Yet the technologies require substantial investment, require expertise to operate and interpret, and cannot definitively identify treasure without physical investigation. The gap between what technology can actually accomplish and what treasure hunters hope for remains substantial, with no device providing reliable treasure vision that eliminates the uncertainty and labour of actual searching. The technologies have shifted treasure hunting from complete speculation to somewhat informed systematic investigation, representing real progress while falling far short of making treasure discovery routine or reliable. The complex web of laws governing ownership of discovered treasures, the ethical obligations that apply to finding historical materials, and the practical realities of dealing with authorities when discoveries occur all shape how treasure hunting actually operates in modern Europe. Understanding the legal and ethical dimensions reveals why simple finding doesn't equal keeping, and why serious treasure hunters must navigate complicated regulatory frameworks. The British Treasure Act of 1996 provides one of the most developed legal frameworks for treasure finds. The Act defines treasure as objects containing substantial gold or silver content that are at least 300 years old, or as groups of coins meeting certain criteria. All treasure finds must be reported to the local coroner within 14 days, with the coroner determining whether finds meet treasure definitions. The finds are then offered to museums, with valuation by independent committee determining fair market price. The reward is split between finder and landowner, creating incentives for proper reporting. The non-treasure objects don't fall under the Act, and ownership depends on property law, with finder and landowner having competing claims. The English property law precedent of finders keepers applies to non-treasure objects, but with significant limitations. The finder has better claim than everyone except the true owner and the landowner. The landowner has superior claim to objects found on or in their property. The distinction between treasure requiring reporting and ordinary finds, keeping under property law, creates ambiguity that requires legal judgment. The practical reality is that ethical metal detectorists obtain permission from landowners before searching, establish clear agreements about sharing finds, and report potentially significant discoveries to Portable Antiquities Scheme, even when not legally required, building relationships with archaeological community while protecting legal positions. The Scottish law differs significantly from English law regarding treasure. The common law doctrine of treasure trove doesn't exist in Scotland. Instead, all found objects that lack identifiable owners become property of the Crown. The practical application is similar to English system in that finders receive rewards, but the legal theory treats all finds as Crown property, rather than distinguishing treasure from non-treasure items. The requirement to report all significant finds means that Scottish treasure hunters must engage with authorities regarding any substantial discoveries. The French law regarding treasure, derived from the Napoleonic Code, splits ownership equally between finder and landowner, regardless of what is found. The simple clarity of the 50-50 split avoids some ambiguities of British law, but France also has extensive archaeological protections that restrict searching, and that require permits for any systematic investigation. The practical reality is that treasure hunting in France requires navigating both property rights and archaeological regulation, with unauthorised searching, risking legal problems, even if technically the finder would be entitled to portion of anything found. The German law varies by state, with some German states treating found objects as state property, while others allow finders to keep portions. The Federal Monuments Protection Act establishes archaeological sites as protected, requiring permits for investigation and giving states authority to regulate searching. The complexity of navigating different state laws means that treasure hunters must understand specific regulations where they plan to search. The emphasis on professional archaeology and on preserving context means that amateur treasure hunting faces more restrictions than in Britain. The Italian Cultural Heritage Code classifies all archaeological materials as state property, with severe penalties for unauthorised excavation or export. The Italian laws reflect strong emphasis on protecting archaeological heritage and on preventing looting of historically significant sites. The practical effect is that legal treasure hunting barely exists in Italy. Any significant find must be reported and becomes state property, with no compensation to finders beyond possible small rewards. The laws reflect judgment that public interest in preserving heritage outweighs individual interest in profiting from found objects. The private property rights that apply across Europe mean that searching without landowner permission constitutes trespass, even where finding objects would be legal. The requirement to obtain permission from property owners before searching adds another layer of complication to treasure hunting. The negotiations with landowners typically involve agreements about sharing fines, with percentages varying by situation and by what local law requires. The sophisticated landowners insist on written agreements specifying ownership of fines before allowing searches, protecting everyone's interests through clear advance understandings. The export restrictions that apply to significant archaeological and historical objects mean that finding treasure doesn't necessarily mean being able to sell it internationally. Most European countries restrict export of nationally significant cultural materials, requiring export licenses that won't be issued for important finds. The restrictions mean that found treasures must be sold domestically, potentially reducing values compared to international markets. The regulations reflect national interests in retaining significant heritage materials, rather than allowing them to disperse to foreign collectors. The ethical obligations that archaeologists and cultural heritage professionals articulate go beyond legal requirements to include responsibilities about preserving context and information. The argument is that objects divorced from their archaeological context lose much of their historical value. Knowing where something was found, in what association with other materials, in what stratigraphic layer, all provide information that is destroyed by treasure hunters focused only on recovering valuable objects. The tension between treasure hunters' interest in finding valuable objects and archaeologists' interest in preserving context creates ongoing conflict between amateur detecting and professional archaeology. The Portable Antiquities Scheme in England provides a model for productive relationship between amateur treasure hunters and professional archaeology. The PAS allows metal detectorists to voluntarily report finds even when not legally required, with finds being recorded and mapped to create a database of distribution patterns for various artifact types. The archaeologists get information that helps understanding of past settlement patterns and material culture, while detectorists get expert identification and participate in contributing to knowledge. The PS success demonstrates that cooperation between amateurs and professionals can be mutually beneficial when properly structured. The night hawking problem, illegal treasure hunting on protected archaeological sites or private property without permission, represents the criminal end of the spectrum. The night hawkers ignore laws, don't report fines, and often damage archaeological context in pursuit of valuable objects. The prosecution of night hawkers caught on protected sites demonstrates that authorities take the problem seriously, yet enforcement is difficult when sites are remote and when offenders can quickly conceal evidence of their activities. The night hawking creates tension between legitimate metal detecting communities and archaeologists by association, even though most detectorists condemn illegal searching. The repatriation claims that arise when found treasures have cultural significance to foreign nations, create international dimensions to ownership questions. The Nazi looted art hidden in various locations and gradually being discovered raises questions about returning materials to original owners or their heirs. The treasures, with religious significance to particular communities or nations, create ethical arguments for return beyond pure legal ownership. The complications show that finding treasure is just the beginning of potentially lengthy processes determining ultimate disposition. Understanding the legal and ethical landscape reveals that treasure hunting exists within complex regulatory frameworks that balance finders' interests against landowners' rights, public interest in preserving heritage, and archaeological concerns about protecting context. The days when finders could simply keep what they discovered are largely over in Europe, with fines being subject to reporting requirements, valuation processes, potential claims by various parties, and export restrictions. The ethical obligations articulated by archaeologists add another layer of considerations beyond pure legal requirements. The practical reality is that serious treasure hunters must understand and navigate these complexities, must obtain appropriate permissions, must be prepared to share fines and to work with authorities, and must accept that finding treasure doesn't automatically translate to keeping or selling it. The legal and ethical frameworks mean that treasure hunting has become formalized activity, requiring knowledge and compliance, rather than romantic adventure outside legal and social norms. The castles where serious treasure hunters and professional investigators concentrate their attention aren't randomly selected but reflect historical research, identifying locations where the combination of documented wealth, historical disruptions, and subsequent loss of knowledge create plausible scenarios for undiscovered treasures. Understanding these focus locations reveals how historical analysis guides searching beyond random speculation. The castles along the Rhine River in Germany have attracted sustained treasure hunting attention due to concentration of wealthy noble families, extensive medieval warfare, and romantic legends preserved in regional folklore. The Rhine Valley castles controlled lucrative river trade, accumulated substantial wealth, and experienced repeated conflicts that might have led to treasure concealment. The Rheinfels Castle, once among the largest fortifications along the Rhine, has underground passages and chambers that have been systematically explored with some archaeological finds, but with persistent rumours of undiscovered treasure chambers. The combination of documented wealth, complex underground architecture, and historical conflicts makes Rhine castles perpetually interesting to treasure hunters, despite extensive previous investigation. The Bohemian castles in Czech Republic, particularly those associated with Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV's reign, represent another concentration of interest. The Karlstein Castle, built to house imperial treasury and holy relics, has been subject to persistent treasure hunting despite being thoroughly documented. The historical records confirm that enormous wealth was stored there, and legends describe some wealth being hidden during conflicts and never recovered. The systematic archaeological investigations have found various artifacts, but no major undiscovered hoards, yet the castle's treasure associations keep attracting searches. The regional castles surrounding Prague that belong to wealthy nobles similarly attract attention based on documented wealth and conflict history. The Scottish Highland castles, particularly those associated with Jacobite uprisings, have treasure legends based on documented losses during the rebellions of 1715 and 1745. The legends describe gold and jewels hidden by fleeing Jacobite nobles who were killed or exiled before recovering their wealth. The Castle Urquhart on Loch Ness has legends of hidden treasure supposedly thrown into the loch during conflicts. The various Highland castles now in ruins have been searched both by treasure hunters and by archaeologists, with occasional finds of coins and artifacts, but nothing matching the legendary hoards The combination of documented historical events, romantic Jacobite associations, and remote locations that might preserve hidden wealth makes Scottish Highland castles perennial treasure hunting targets. The Crusader castles across the Levant and Mediterranean regions have attracted searchers based on Knights Templar associations and legends about Crusader wealth. The Crack de Chevalier in Syria, the Acre fortifications in Israel, and various other Crusader strongholds have treasure legends, despite the historical reality that most Crusader wealth was spent on maintaining expensive military operations rather than being hidden. The difficulty of searching in politically unstable regions has actually preserved some sites from extensive treasure hunting, though archaeological excavations have thoroughly investigated major Crusader sites without finding legendary hoards. The Austrian Alpine castles, particularly those used by Habsburgs as retreats and administrative centres, represent another focus area. The legends about Habsburg treasure hidden during World War I and during the Empire's dissolution attract continuing interest despite most Habsburg valuables being properly secured and eventually recovered. The remote mountain locations, the numerous castles in varying states of preservation, and the region's generally weak archaeological documentation compared to more accessible areas create possibilities that undiscovered materials might exist. The systematic archaeological and historical investigations of major sites have clarified most significant mysteries, but minor castles remain incompletely documented. The remaining castles associated with Vlad Dracula and medieval Wallachian princes attract treasure hunters despite the historical reality that these regions' nobles were less wealthy than their Western European contemporaries. The Bran Castle, promoted as Dracula's Castle, and various other Transylvanian fortifications have treasure legends that appear to be largely modern inventions catering to tourist interest. Yet the systematic archaeological work at these sites has revealed medieval materials that document actual historical events, showing how serious investigation of legendary locations can produce genuine historical insights even when treasure itself proves elusive. The Spanish Reconquista castles, where Christian and Moorish forces contested the Iberian Peninsula, have legends about hidden Moorish wealth, supposedly concealed during the Christian conquests. The historical reality is that most territories changed hands through negotiated surrenders, where wealth was transferred ordinarily, but the romantic narratives about desperate last stands and hidden treasures persist. The extensive castle remains across Spain and Portugal attract both professional, archaeological investigation and amateur treasure hunting, with the professional work revealing substantial information about medieval warfare and daily life, even when spectacular treasures don't emerge. The Italian castle monasteries combining military and religious functions have attracted attention based on legends about monastic treasures hidden during various conflicts affecting Italy. The Monte Cassino monastery, destroyed during World War II and subsequently rebuilt, had legends about hidden treasures that investigations haven't validated. The various fortified monasteries across Italy have been systematically studied by archaeologists and historians, generally revealing that most valuable materials were either properly secured and recovered, were looted during conflicts, or are now in museums. The treasure legends attached to these sites appear to have more romantic than historical basis. The Norman castles in England, particularly those associated with wealthy medieval families, have been targets of metal detecting and of archaeological investigation. The documented coin hoards found during castle excavations and renovations demonstrate that wealth was indeed hidden, while the systematic archaeological investigations of major sites have recovered extensive materials providing insights into medieval life. The distinction between treasure hunters seeking valuable objects and archaeologists seeking information creates tension, but the productivity of both approaches when properly applied shows that castle sites continue yielding materials of various types of value. The selection criteria that serious treasure hunters apply when choosing where to focus efforts include several factors: documented historical evidence of substantial wealth being present, specific historical events like sieges, sudden deaths, or political upheavals that might have led to hasty concealment, subsequent loss of knowledge suggesting that any hidden wealth wasn't recovered by contemporaries, accessibility for searching either through sites being in ruins or through possibility of obtaining permission from owners, legal frameworks allowing keeping some portion of fines rather than all discoveries becoming government property, an absence of prior systematic professional investigation that would have likely found anything major that existed, Understanding where serious treasure hunters focus reveals that romantic speculation gives way to historical analysis among those approaching treasure hunting systematically. Rather than as pure fantasy, the castles attracting sustained attention are those where historical documentation and logical analysis create plausible scenarios for undiscovered wealth, even while recognizing that most specific treasure legends prove to be exaggerated or false. The systematic approach based on historical research, on understanding medieval practice regarding wealth concealment, and on realistic assessment of what types of discoveries are actually possible, represents more sophisticated treasure hunting than legendary quests for obviously fictional hoards. Yet even systematic, historically informed treasure hunting produces limited success, demonstrating that knowledge and logic increase odds without guaranteeing results in fundamentally probabilistic pursuit. The financial realities of treasure hunting reveal that the pursuit is almost never economically rational when analysed as investment or as realistic path to wealth, yet people continue treasure hunting for complex reasons including hope, enjoyment, historical interest, and the lottery-like appeal of potentially life-changing discovery. Understanding treasure hunting economics explains both why it continues, despite poor returns, and why those pursuing it should manage expectations realistically. The equipment costs for serious treasure hunting create substantial initial investment before any searching begins. A quality metal detector suitable for serious searching costs $1,000 to $5,000, with professional grade detectors exceeding $10,000. The accessories including spare coils, headphones, digging tools, GPS devices and various other items add hundreds to thousands more. The transportation costs to reach promising sites, the accommodation costs for extended searching trips, and the food and other expenses during searches all accumulate. The typical serious detector might invest $10,000 or more in equipment and expenses before making any significant finds. The value of typical finds must be weighed against investment and time. Most metal detecting produces large quantities of trash, bottle caps, pull tabs, nails, modern coins of negligible value, requiring sorting to identify the occasional items of interest. The productive detecting sessions might yield old coins, buttons, buckles, or other artifacts worth tens to hundreds of pounds, occasionally reaching thousands for particularly nice finds, yet the ratio of time invested to value recovered rarely approaches even minimum wage returns. Most detectorists understand they're pursuing expensive hobby rather than profitable activity, with any fines offsetting costs rather than generating actual income. The legal compliance costs add another dimension. In jurisdictions requiring permits, the application fees, the documentation requirements, and the time spent on compliance all represent costs beyond equipment and searching. The necessity of reporting fines under treasure laws means engaging with authorities, potentially waiting months or years for valuation and disposition processes to complete, and accepting prices determined by official valuations rather than by open markets. The treasure laws generally provide reasonable rewards, but the process involves delays and bureaucracy that frustrated treasure hunters find costly in time and uncertainty. The opportunity costs of time spent treasure hunting represent perhaps the largest economic factor. The hours spent researching potential sites, travelling to locations, conducting searches, and processing finds could alternatively be spent working at paid employment. The career professional earning $50,000 annually, who spends 500 hours yearly treasure hunting, is sacrificing $25,000 in potential income, assuming overtime availability, while recovering finds worth perhaps $500 in a good year. The pure economic calculation shows massive losses, yet people make these choices because they value the activity itself beyond monetary returns. The comparison to conventional investment demonstrates the economic irrationality of treasure hunting as financial strategy. The $10,000 invested in detector equipment, invested instead in stock index fund earning historical 10% annual returns, would grow to over $25,000 in 10 years. The same amount spent on treasure hunting equipment will typically produce finds worth a small fraction of original investment over the same period. The treasure hunter might argue that the enjoyment and experience have value beyond financial returns, which is entirely valid, but claims that treasure hunting is financially sensible. Investment are difficult to support with evidence. The rare spectacular finds that justify entire treasure hunting hobby economically are so infrequent that planning for them is irrational. The Staffordshire hoard finder received over £1.5 million, seemingly justifying the £2.50 cost of the metal detector used to find it. Yet millions of hours of detecting by thousands of detectorists produced that one find. The odds of any individual detectorist making similarly spectacular find in their lifetime are vanishingly small. The lottery-like probability distribution, where most searchers find nothing substantial, while occasional individuals hit jackpots, creates false hope based on highly visible rare successes. The commercial treasure hunting promoted in books, videos and courses often constitutes main financial success in the field. The promoters make money selling treasure hunting materials and experiences while most buyers never recover costs. The treasure hunting books promising secret knowledge, the expensive seminars teaching detection techniques, the treasure maps sold to gullible buyers, all these generate income for sellers while rarely providing value-justifying costs to buyers. The legitimate information is generally available free or cheaply, making expensive courses and materials economically questionable for most buyers. The academic or archaeological career path involving castle investigation offers more realistic though modest financial returns. The archaeologists excavating castle sites earn ordinary academic or civil service salaries, not treasure hunters' dreams of sudden wealth. Yet they have access to sites, authority to conduct systematic investigation, expert knowledge, and they contribute to knowledge while receiving stable income. The archaeological approach to castle investigation is financially sensible career for those interested in the field, while romantic treasure hunting is expensive hobby at best and financial disaster at worst. The recreational value that treasure hunting provides should be accounted honestly rather than disguised as investment. The metal detectorist who spends $5,000 on equipment and dedicates weekends to searching is pursuing recreation comparable to golf, sailing, or any other expensive hobby. If the enjoyment justifies cost, then treasure hunting is a reasonable recreational choice. The problems arise when treasure hunting is justified or undertaken as financial strategy, as get-rich scheme, or as alternative to conventional work, none of which the economics support. The professional treasure hunters who actually earn income from finding valuables are extraordinarily rare and typically combine detection with related businesses. The detector manufacturer or seller who also conducts demonstrations and searches, the writer who supplements book income with occasional significant finds, the person conducting paid searches for property owners who lost items. These represent the few who actually earn from treasure hunting. Even then, the income from actual finds is typically a small portion of overall income compared to related businesses or conventional employment. The insurance and liability costs that responsible treasure hunters face add another expense. The liability for damage to property while searching, the theft or damage of expensive equipment, the potential for injuries during searches, all create risks that prudent searchers should insure against the insurance costs, while typically modest, further reduce net returns from treasure hunting, while providing necessary protection against potentially catastrophic losses from liability claims or equipment loss. Understanding treasure hunting economics reveals that the pursuit makes sense primarily as recreation, as historical engagement, or as participation in archaeological citizen science, rather than as financial endeavour. The costs typically far exceed recoveries, the time invested rarely generates returns approaching minimum wage, and the probability of spectacular finds that would justify costs is vanishingly small. The people who engage in treasure hunting, despite poor economics, do so because they enjoy the activity, because they find satisfaction in discovering historical artefacts, because they appreciate being outdoors and being physically active, or because they value the hope and possibility regardless of probable outcomes. These are all legitimate reasons for pursuing expensive hobbies, but they aren't financial justifications, and those entering treasure hunting should understand the economic realities to avoid false expectations that lead to disappointment or financial harm when treasure hunting fails to deliver the riches that romantic fantasies promise. As this comprehensive exploration of castle treasures concludes, what emerges most powerfully is recognition that the romantic fantasy of discovering life-changing wealth hidden in European castles, while grounded in enough historical reality to be plausible, is vastly less likely than popular imagination suggests, creating tension between legitimate historical possibilities and unrealistic expectations that drives both productive archaeological investigation and wasteful speculative searching. The treasures are simultaneously real. Documented discoveries prove that wealth was hidden, and occasionally remains undiscovered for centuries, and largely inaccessible to casual treasure hunters whose limited resources, restricted access, and lack of expertise mean that most searching produces nothing of value, while professional archaeological investigation gradually reveals genuine historical materials that advance understanding even when they don't match romantic treasure fantasies. The genuine documented discoveries that have emerged from castle contexts and surroundings prove the basic premise that motivates treasure hunting. Substantial wealth was indeed hidden. Some remained undiscovered by contemporaries, and modern investigators occasionally find it. The Hoxton Hoard, the Staffordshire Hoard, the various coin caches discovered during castle renovations, and the numerous smaller finds that emerge regularly, all demonstrate that the fundamental premise is sound, even if the probability of any specific search succeeding is low. Yet the documented discoveries also reveal patterns. Most are found accidentally during construction or agricultural work rather than through deliberate searching. Most involve coins rather than other valuables, and most are modest rather than spectacular, challenging romantic notions of treasure hunters discovering enormous hoards through persistence and skill. The legendary treasures that capture imagination and that drive much searching exist mostly in the realm of fiction or of extensively embellished history. The Knights Templar treasure, the Nazi gold, the various lost royal hoards, and most other famous treasure legends are either complete fabrications, are misrepresentations of wealth that was recovered long ago, or describe materials that were lost to circumstances making recovery impossible. The critical evaluation of these legends using historical evidence reveals that most should be regarded as cultural narratives, serving various purposes rather than as reliable guides to actual searching. Yet the legends persist because definitive disproof is impossible, because the romantic appeal is powerful, and because the occasional genuine discovery keeps hope alive that one more legend might prove true despite the pattern showing that most don't. The technological tools available to modern treasure hunters provide genuine capabilities for detecting buried metals and for mapping subsurface structures that were impossible before recent decades. The metal detectors that have revolutionized amateur treasure hunting, the ground-penetrating radar used by professional investigators, and the various other remote sensing technologies create possibilities for systematic investigation rather than random digging. Yet the technologies have limitations. They detect anomalies rather than definitively identifying treasure. They require expertise to operate and interpret effectively. They're expensive enough that serious capabilities are beyond most amateurs' budgets, and they cannot overcome the fundamental problem that most castle contexts have been so thoroughly disturbed over centuries that identifying specific hiding places is nearly impossible, even with sophisticated equipment. The legal and ethical frameworks governing treasure hunting in modern Europe mean that simple finding doesn't equal keeping, and that serious treasure hunters must navigate complex regulations, must obtain permissions, must report significant fines, and must accept that ultimate disposition of discoveries might not align with finders' preferences. The British Treasure Act and similar laws across Europe balance finders' interests against public interest in preserving heritage, generally providing fair compensation while ensuring significant discoveries are preserved for museums and research. The ethical arguments articulated by archaeologists about preserving context and information add another layer of considerations beyond legal requirements, creating tensions between amateur treasure hunters focused on recovering valuable objects and professional archaeologists prioritizing information over objects. The frameworks mean that treasure hunting has become formalized activity, requiring knowledge and compliance rather than romantic adventure outside social norms. The economic realities of treasure hunting reveal that the pursuit is almost never financially rational, with equipment costs, time investments, and expenses typically far exceeding value of finds, making treasure hunting expensive hobby rather than viable path to wealth, for all but the extraordinarily lucky few who make spectacular discoveries. The comparison to conventional investment shows that funds spent on metal detectors and searching expeditions would generate better returns through boring stock market investments, while time spent treasure hunting could generate more income through conventional employment. The persistence of treasure hunting, despite poor economics, reflects that people pursue it for recreational value, for historical interest, for the thrill of discovery, and for the lottery-like hope of spectacular find rather than for rational financial reasons. The understanding that treasure hunting is recreational pursuit should inform expectations, preventing the financial harm that occurs when people invest resources they cannot afford to lose in quests unlikely to produce returns. The specific castle locations where serious treasure hunters and professional investigators focus reflect historical analysis, identifying scenarios where the combination of documented wealth, historical disruptions, and subsequent loss of knowledge creates plausible possibilities for undiscovered materials. The Rhine Valley castles, the Bohemian strongholds, the Scottish Highland fortifications, and various other concentration points attract sustained attention not through random selection, but through understanding where historical circumstances might have led to treasure concealment and long-term loss. Yet even historically informed, systematic treasure hunting at promising locations produces limited success, demonstrating that knowledge and logic improve odds without guaranteeing results in pursuit that remains fundamentally probabilistic, with low overall success rates. The broader cultural significance of castle treasure legends and treasure hunting exceeds the practical question of whether treasures exist or can be found. The legends preserve public interest in medieval history, motivate historical research into their origins and development, inspire creative works in literature and media, and provide recreational activities connecting people to historical sites and to past events. The treasure hunting community, when properly engaged with archaeological and legal frameworks, contributes to knowledge through reporting finds and through conducting systematic searches that archaeologists lack resources to undertake. The tension between treasure hunters' focus on valuable objects and archaeologists' focus on information creates conflict, but also creates possibilities for productive cooperation when mutual respect and clear frameworks govern interactions. The future of castle treasure hunting will likely involve increasing technological sophistication, tightening regulations, balancing amateur enthusiasm against heritage protection, continuing tension between romantic treasure hunters and professional archaeologists, an ongoing stream of modest discoveries punctuated by occasional spectacular finds that renew hope and that validate the basic premise, even as statistics confirm the low probability of individual success. The non-invasive technologies particularly will become more sophisticated and more accessible, allowing more comprehensive investigation of castle sites without destructive digging. The legal frameworks will probably evolve toward models like Britain's Portable Antiquities Scheme that facilitate cooperation between amateurs and professionals while ensuring significant discoveries are properly reported and preserved. The recommendations for those interested in castle treasures and treasure hunting include managing expectations realistically, understanding that treasure hunting is an expensive hobby rather than path to wealth, learning history and archaeology to make any searching more systematic and productive, complying with legal requirements and obtaining necessary permissions, reporting significant finds even when not legally required, cooperating with professional archaeologists who can provide expertise and context, investing in quality equipment if pursuing seriously, focusing on recreational value and historical interest rather than financial returns, and accepting that most searching will produce nothing of monetary value, while potentially providing satisfaction, exercise, historical engagement, and occasional modest finds that make the activity rewarding as hobby, even when it doesn't deliver treasure hunters' ultimate fantasy of discovering life-changing wealth. As light returns and this extensive exploration of castle treasures concludes, what remains is balanced recognition that the treasures are simultaneously real and largely inaccessible, historically documented and romantically exaggerated, occasionally found and mostly lost to circumstances preventing recovery, pursued systematically by those with knowledge and equipment, and imagined speculatively by those with only legends and hope. The castles standing across Europe do contain secrets, do occasionally yield treasures to patient investigators or to lucky finders, and do preserve possibilities that future discoveries will continue emerging as technology advances and as systematic investigation proceeds. Yet the reality is that most castle treasures that ever existed have already been found, by contemporaries who knew where they were hidden, by subsequent generations who discovered them accidentally, or by systematic professional investigation over past centuries. The materials that remain undiscovered are the exceptions, the small percentage that through unusual circumstances escaped recovery despite centuries of opportunity. probability that any individual treasure hunter will find significant undiscovered wealth is low, regardless of dedication, investment, or belief in particular legends. The treasure hunting that makes sense is that pursued as recreation, as historical engagement, as contribution to knowledge when finds are properly reported, and as participation in the cultural tradition of seeking wealth and mystery in landscape and in ruins that previous generations inhabited, and that preserve their stories in stone, in earth, and in the occasional glint of gold that emerges from darkness into the light of modern discovery, to remind us that history remains incompletely known, and that the past still holds secrets waiting for those persistent, knowledgeable, and lucky enough to uncover them. The systematic archaeological excavations of castle sites across Europe, while not motivated by treasure hunting in the romantic sense, regularly produce discoveries that illuminate what actually remains to be found in castle contexts, and how professional methodology reveals materials that casual treasure hunters miss. Understanding these case studies reveals both what exists to be discovered and why professional approaches succeed where amateur searching typically fails. The excavation of Sandal Castle in Yorkshire, England, provided comprehensive example of what medieval castle archaeology produces. The systematic investigation spanning multiple seasons revealed extensive foundations, documented construction phases, recovered thousands of artefacts illuminating daily life, and discovered evidence of the castle's violent destruction during the Wars of the Roses. The finds included coins, but the real treasure was the information about how the castle functioned, how it was defended, and how it fell. The ceramic assemblages revealed trading patterns, the animal bones documented diet, and the architectural evidence showed construction techniques. The treasure was knowledge rather than gold, yet the value to understanding medieval England was substantial. The investigation of Castelli-Bear in Wales demonstrated how remote, ruined castles that seem picked clean can still yield significant materials. The excavations recovered artefacts spanning the castle's occupation, revealed previously unknown architectural features, and documented the castle's role in Welsh resistance to English conquest. The finds included personal items like jewellery and gaming pieces that told stories about the people who lived in the castle. The discovery of workshops showed industrial activities occurring within castle walls. The systematic excavation revealed layers of occupation and use invisible to surface observation, demonstrating how much remains to be learned from even heavily damaged sites. The Prague Castle Archaeological Programme, spanning decades, has systematically investigated one of Europe's largest castle complexes. Revealing continuous occupation from prehistoric through modern times, the excavations have produced extraordinary assemblages including jewellery, coins, weapons, tools, and countless other artefacts documenting over a millennium of occupation. The discovery of earlier structures beneath later buildings, the revelation of construction techniques, and the recovery of materials documenting daily life at various periods all demonstrate that even intensively occupied sites that seem thoroughly known contain enormous amounts of undiscovered information and materials. The finds aren't hidden treasure in romantic sense, but rather systematic accumulations from centuries of human activity. The Tintagel Castle excavations in Cornwall, England, associated with Arthurian legend, revealed that beneath romantic mythology lay genuine early medieval elite settlement, with extensive Mediterranean connections, the discovery of pottery from North Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean, the evidence of metalworking and glassworking, and the architectural remains of substantial structures all demonstrated that Tintagel was major centre during the early medieval period. The excavations showed that investigating legendary sites with proper methodology can reveal genuine historical significance that differs from but exceeds the romantic legends, providing actual knowledge rather than merely confirming or denying treasure stories. The Chepstow Castle investigation using modern archaeological techniques revealed aspects of the castle invisible in traditional historical studies. The environmental archaeology recovering plant remains and animal bones documented diet and agriculture. The analysis of building materials revealed construction sourcing and techniques, and the geophysical surveys identified buried structures before excavation began. The multidisciplinary approach, combining traditional excavation with scientific analysis, created comprehensive understanding of the castle's history and function. The methodology demonstrated that systematic investigation produces insights that simple treasure hunting focused only on valuable objects would completely miss. The castle rising excavations in Norfolk showed how apparently well-documented elite residences contain unknown features and materials. The geophysical survey revealed previously unknown structures in the Bailey. The excavation exposed architectural details that documents hadn't recorded, and the finds assemblages included artifacts that illuminated aspects of noble life not preserved in written sources. The discovery of industrial activities alongside residential functions showed the castle's economic role beyond its military and residential purposes. The excavation demonstrated that even sites with extensive documentary records contain physical evidence that documents don't capture, and that archaeological investigation uniquely reveals. The Old Sarum excavations in Wiltshire, England, investigated the medieval castle and cathedral that preceded Salisbury's current location. The extensive excavations revealed the complete layout of the medieval settlement, recovered artefacts from the royal castle, and documented the site's abandonment when the settlement moved to the current Salisbury location. The finds included coins, jewellery, tools, weapons, and the countless objects of daily life that accumulated during the site's occupation. The systematic recovery and recording meant that each find contributed to understanding the site's development, rather than being merely treasure to be pocketed. The Conwy Castle investigation, combining standing structure analysis with excavation, revealed construction details and original appearance that documents alone couldn't provide. The architectural analysis identified building phases and modifications. The excavation recovered materials from construction and occupation phases, and the finds included artifacts illuminating garrison life. The investigation showed how Edward I's conquest castles were built and maintained, providing insights into late 13th century military architecture and logistics. The comprehensive approach demonstrated that castles should be understood as complex historical monuments, rather than merely as potential treasure repositories. The Bolsover Castle archaeological work in Derbyshire revealed that even castles transformed into palatial residences in later periods retain evidence of earlier military functions. The excavation exposed medieval foundations beneath 17th century construction, recovered artifacts from different occupation phases, and documented the castle's transformation from military to residential purposes. The finds ranged from medieval weapons and armour fragments to Renaissance luxury goods, illustrating changing uses across centuries. The stratigraphic excavation ensured that materials from different periods remained distinguished, allowing reconstruction of the site's development rather than merely accumulating decontextualised finds. The Dunstaffnage Castle excavations in Scotland showed how systematic investigation of occupied sites requires balancing heritage preservation with research objectives. The limited excavations conducted during conservation work recovered significant artefact assemblages, revealed construction details, and documented occupation phases. The necessity of minimising disturbance to standing structures meant excavation was targeted rather than comprehensive, yet even limited investigation produced valuable information. The case illustrated how archaeological research increasingly occurs during conservation projects rather than through independent excavation campaigns. The comparative analysis of finds from multiple castle excavations reveals patterns in what survives and what gets discovered. Ceramics and metal objects dominate assemblages because they survive burial, while organic materials decay. Coins are common finds because they were common possessions that got lost or hidden. Personal ornaments and tools appear regularly because people lived and worked in castles, leaving behind the material culture of daily life. Weapons and armour appear less frequently because they were valuable and carefully maintained, being lost less often than utilitarian objects. The patterns show that systematic excavation produces comprehensive assemblages documenting all aspects of castle life, rather than just the valuable items that treasure hunters seek. The significance of context that professional excavation preserves transforms finds from mere objects into historical evidence. The coin found in a specific floor layer helps date the floor's construction. The pottery assemblage from a rubbish pit reveals dining practices and trade connections. The architectural sequence established through stratigraphic excavation documents the castle's development. The associations between finds in particular contexts reveal activities and events that isolated objects couldn't demonstrate. The information that archaeological excavation produces often exceeds the monetary value of finds themselves, creating knowledge treasure complementing or surpassing material wealth. The publication of archaeological excavation results ensures that discoveries contribute to broader understanding rather than vanishing into private collections. The excavation reports documenting methods, contexts, and finds allow other scholars to use the information, to compare results across sites, and to build comprehensive understanding of castle architecture, occupation, and use. The requirement that professional excavations be published means that even modest discoveries contribute to knowledge, while unpublished treasure hunting finds, however spectacular, provide limited scholarly value. The publication requirement distinguishes professional archaeology from private treasure hunting in ways that affect how discoveries benefit society. Understanding archaeological case studies reveals that systematic professional investigation of castle sites regularly produces significant discoveries, though usually not treasure in the romantic sense of gold hoards waiting to be claimed. The discoveries are assemblages of artifacts documenting daily life, architectural features revealing construction and use, environmental evidence illuminating diet and economy, and the countless details that accumulate into comprehensive understanding of how castles functioned and what roles they played in medieval society. The archaeological approach values information over objects, context over isolated finds, and systematic understanding over spectacular individual discoveries. Yet the accumulated discoveries from decades of professional castle archaeology demonstrate that enormous amounts of material remain to be discovered in castle contexts, validating the basic premise that treasures, whether monetary or informational, still lie hidden within castle walls and grounds, waiting for patient, systematic investigation to reveal them to modern understanding. As this comprehensive exploration of castle treasures concludes, the overwhelming impression is of fundamental tension between the romantic dream that drives treasure hunting, the belief that life-changing wealth lies hidden within reach, waiting to be discovered through persistence, knowledge, and luck, and the sobering reality that while treasures do exist and are occasionally found, the vast majority of searching produces nothing of significant value, making treasure hunting economically irrational, yet psychologically compelling activity that continues attracting participants despite evidence that success is unlikely. The documented discoveries that prove castle treasures are real provide factual foundation that sustains hope and that validates basic premise motivating treasure hunters. The Hoxton hoard, the Staffordshire hoard, the numerous coin hoards discovered during renovations, and the countless smaller finds that emerge from castle contexts demonstrate conclusively that substantial wealth was hidden and that some remained undiscovered by contemporaries, eventually being found by later generations. Yet the statistical reality is that documented discoveries represent a tiny fraction of total searching effort, with millions of hours of metal detecting and investigation producing mostly trash and disappointment, punctuated by occasional modest finds and extremely rare spectacular discoveries. The ratio of effort to result is so unfavourable that treasure hunting makes sense primarily as recreation or as contribution to archaeology rather than as realistic path to wealth. The legendary treasures that capture imagination and that motivate much searching exist mostly in realm of fiction or of extensively embellished history, with critical historical analysis revealing that most famous treasure legends are either complete fabrications or describe wealth that was recovered long ago or was lost to circumstances making recovery impossible. The Knights Templar treasure, the Nazi gold, the various lost royal hoards, all these persist as cultural narratives despite lacking credible historical support. Yet the legends serve important psychological and cultural functions, maintaining public interest in medieval history, inspiring creative works, and providing framework for harmless fantasy that enriches lives even when the treasures themselves prove to be purely imaginary. The recognition that most legends are fiction doesn't diminish their cultural value, though it should temper expectations about actually discovering the wealth they describe. The technological tools available to modern treasure hunters provide genuine capabilities that previous generations lacked, transforming searching from pure speculation to somewhat systematic investigation. The metal detectors that revolutionized amateur treasure hunting, the ground-penetrating radar that maps subsurface structures, and the various other remote sensing technologies create possibilities for detecting anomalies worth investigating. Yet the technologies have inherent limitations. They detect but don't identify, they require expertise to interpret, they're expensive at professional level, and they cannot overcome the fundamental problem that most potential hiding places have been thoroughly disturbed over centuries. The technology improves odds without guaranteeing success, representing progress while falling short of making treasure discovery routine or reliable. The legal and ethical frameworks governing modern treasure hunting mean that finding doesn't equal keeping, and that successful treasure hunters must navigate complex regulations, must share discoveries with landowners and authorities, and must accept that disposition of finds might not align with finders' preferences. The British Treasure Act and similar laws across Europe generally provide fair compensation, while ensuring significant discoveries are preserved for public benefit rather than vanishing into private collections. The ethical arguments about preserving context and information add considerations beyond legal requirements, creating framework where responsible treasure hunting can coexist with heritage protection. The regulatory environment has formalised treasure hunting, requiring knowledge and compliance, while ensuring that significant discoveries contribute to public knowledge rather than purely benefiting private individuals. The economic realities demonstrating that treasure hunting is an expensive hobby, rather than viable path to wealth, should inform expectations and financial decisions. The equipment costs, time investments, and expenses typically far exceed value of finds, making treasure hunting irrational as pure investment while being justifiable as recreation, as historical engagement, or as participation in archaeological citizen science. The persistence of treasure hunting despite poor economics reflects that people pursue it for psychological and recreational benefits, rather than for rational financial reasons, which is entirely legitimate as long as participants understand and accept the economic realities, rather than harbouring false expectations that lead to financial harm when treasure hunting fails to deliver the riches that romantic fantasies promise. The psychological motivations driving treasure hunting reveal complex interplay of hope, adventure-seeking, historical connection, intellectual engagement, community participation, and fantasy fulfillment that create compelling reasons for participation, regardless of low probability of finding significant wealth. The lottery-like appeal of asymmetric risk-reward, the adventure and exploration dimensions, the tangible connection to history, the puzzle-solving challenges, and the various other psychological benefits create activity that serves human needs even when it doesn't produce treasure. The understanding that treasure hunting is primarily psychological and recreational activity, rather than economic strategy, allows realistic appreciation of its value, while explaining persistent appeal despite evidence of poor returns. The archaeological case studies demonstrating what systematic professional investigation actually produces reveal that enormous amounts of valuable information and materials remain to be discovered in castle contexts, though usually not in form of romantic treasure hoards. The systematic excavations produce comprehensive assemblages documenting daily life, architectural evidence revealing construction and use, and countless details that accumulate into sophisticated understanding of medieval castles and the societies that built and inhabited them. The archaeological approach prioritizes information over objects and context over isolated finds, creating knowledge that benefits public understanding rather than private wealth. Yet the discoveries prove that castle contexts remain incompletely investigated, and that systematic searching continues producing significant materials. The specific castles and locations where serious treasure hunters focus reflect historical analysis, identifying scenarios where documented wealth, historical disruptions and subsequent loss of knowledge create plausible possibilities for undiscovered materials. The Rhine Valley castles, the Bohemian strongholds, the Scottish Highland fortifications, and various other concentration points attract sustained attention through historically informed analysis rather than random selection. Yet even systematic searching at promising locations produces limited success, demonstrating that historical knowledge improves odds without guaranteeing results, in pursuit that remains fundamentally probabilistic with low overall success rates. The searching techniques and methodologies that serious treasure hunters employ go far beyond random speculation, incorporating historical research, landscape analysis, geophysical survey, and systematic protocols that distinguish informed searching from crude digging. The sophisticated approaches demonstrate that treasure hunting can be intellectually rigorous pursuit, requiring knowledge, planning, and proper methodology. The systematic techniques substantially improve odds of discovery, while ensuring that any finds are made responsibly and are properly documented, creating framework where treasure hunting can be legitimate activity, contributing to rather than detracting from archaeological knowledge. The conservation and preservation challenges that emerge when discoveries occur require specialised knowledge and careful treatment to ensure finds survive discovery process without deterioration or damage. The proper conservation that prevents decay, that preserves historical information, and that enables research and display distinguishes responsible finder from careless vandal. The commitment to conservation demonstrates respect for materials as historical evidence rather than merely as possessions or commodities, reflecting values that prioritise preservation alongside discovery. The future of castle treasure hunting will likely involve increasing sophistication in both technology and methodology, tightening regulations balancing amateur enthusiasm against heritage protection, continuing evolution of frameworks facilitating cooperation between amateurs and professionals, an ongoing stream of modest discoveries punctuated by occasional spectacular finds that renew hope and that validate basic premise. The non-invasive technologies particularly will continue advancing, enabling more comprehensive investigation without destructive excavation. The legal frameworks will probably evolve toward models facilitating cooperation while ensuring proper reporting and preservation of significant discoveries. The recommendations for those interested in castle treasures and treasure hunting include managing expectations realistically, treating treasure hunting as expensive hobby rather than as path to wealth, learning history and archaeology to make searching more informed and productive, complying with legal requirements and obtaining necessary permissions, reporting significant finds and contributing to knowledge even when not legally required, cooperating with professional archaeologists who can provide expertise, investing in quality equipment if pursuing seriously, focusing on recreational and educational value rather than financial returns, practicing proper conservation to preserve finds, and accepting that most searching will produce nothing of significant monetary value while potentially providing satisfaction, exercise, historical engagement, and occasional modest finds that make activity rewarding as hobby, even when it doesn't deliver treasure hunters' ultimate fantasy of discovering life-changing wealth. As light returns and this extensive exploration concludes, what remains is balanced recognition that castle treasures are simultaneously real and largely inaccessible, historically documented and romantically exaggerated, occasionally found and mostly lost to circumstances preventing recovery, pursued systematically by those with knowledge and equipment, and imagined speculatively by those with only legends and hope. The castles standing across Europe do contain secrets, do occasionally yield treasures to patient investigators or to lucky finders, and do preserve possibilities that future discoveries will continue emerging as technology advances and as systematic investigation proceeds. Yet the sobering reality remains that most castle treasures that ever existed have already been found, by contemporaries who knew where they were hidden, by subsequent generations who discovered them accidentally, or by systematic professional investigation over past centuries. The materials remaining undiscovered are the exceptions, the small percentage that through unusual circumstances escaped recovery despite centuries of opportunity. The probability that any individual treasure hunter will find significant undiscovered wealth is low regardless of dedication, investment, or belief in particular legends. The treasure hunting that makes sense is that pursued with realistic expectations, as recreation providing multiple forms of value beyond financial returns, as historical engagement connecting participants to pass through tangible artifacts, as contribution to knowledge when finds are properly reported, and as participation in cultural tradition of seeking wealth and mystery in landscape that previous generations inhabited. The dream of hidden wealth will persist as long as humans imagine possibilities beyond their present circumstances, and as long as occasional genuine discoveries provide evidence that sometimes, rarely, the dream becomes reality for the fortunate few whose persistence, knowledge, and luck combine to reveal what centuries of concealment had preserved, waiting in darkness for the moment when modern discovery brings it into light and into awareness, transforming historical mystery into present knowledge, and occasionally, very occasionally, transforming discoverers' fortune in ways that justify all the hope, all the investment, and all the searching that characterises the enduring human pursuit of hidden treasure.